Excuse me. Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on Clemson at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for joining me. Brought to you proudly by FanDuel. Go check out our friends over on FanDuel. You can get live betting lines as we watch the end of this Clemson versus Wake Forest game. Clemson pulling it a little bit closer than it was in that first half when Wake Forest couldn't miss. So go check out some betting lines over at FanDuel. Make yourself a little bit of money while we watch the end of this, what hopefully will be an exciting Clemson victory. With that said, guys, before we get into the show tonight, couple of things. If you want to support the channel, we have channel memberships. We also have the super chat feature, as you guys know. At the end of every show, me and Jordan get to as many comments as we can. So go hit that super chat feature. It'll be sure that your comment and or question is read during this live episode. If you want to become a channel member and support the show on a monthly basis, click that join button right below this video, and that would help us out greatly. Consider subscribing. Me and Jordan do the All In Show year-round. So stick it out with us through this long desert of a college football offseason, and we would appreciate that. And with that said, and without further ado, I'm going to bring on my co-host, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, what's up, man? How you doing tonight? Doing it on a little bit of a different night, Wednesday. I was a little under the weather yesterday. Just could not muster up the strength to come on here and do the show, but I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be on here talking Clemson football with you and seeing all of our loyal subscribers here ready to chop it up and talk about Clemson football and Clemson sports in general. So how you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Glad to be on tonight. Joining from the phone today, but we're gonna make this work. So y'all just bear with me. It's been interesting, kind of watching this basketball game going on. I mean, Wake Forest had about as good of an offensive half as you could have. They just weren't missing. The Tigers have clawed their way back into it a little bit, but
yeah.
I don't know, man. They're in danger of losing their third straight, and after we talked so much about this team being well within their position to potentially be competing for first place in the ACC standings, and now you're staring a third straight loss in the face, and this one would be I think this one would be a quad two, maybe a quad three. I don't think it's a quad three, but it would be a not so great quad two loss.
Right.
So you got to hope that they work their way back into this one. It's they were down by 13 at half. It's a 7-point game currently. I don't know. We'll see. They're playing much better defensively, so hopefully, they can muster up enough offense and get this one done.
Yeah, absolutely.
You hit that one. Oh my goodness.
Hopefully they can do something to bring this one home. This would not be a good loss for the Tigers, especially when it comes to trying to compete for those ACC standings here as the season winds down to an end here. So we'll keep an eye on the basketball game, but we're going to dive into the show tonight. Shout out to the comment section, the live chat before we get going tonight. John Sarian, first one in here. Thank you so much for being in here. Thank you for being a monthly supporter of the channel, being a channel member, and also being one of our OGs, one of our moderators around here. Appreciate all that you do here, John Sarian. Isaac Smith is in here. Thank you so much for being in here tonight. Arthur, one of our great channel members as well. Good evening to you, sir. Good to see you in here. I think that's everybody so far. Get your comments, get your questions in there. As you guys know, as we get towards the end of the show and our planned portion is over, we will get to as many comments and questions as we can. Jordan, the NFL Combine is ever quickly approaching, and for 9 Clemson Tigers, they will have their talents on display for all 32 NFL teams. We got 4 guys that were invited on offense, 5 guys that were invited on defense. I will quickly run down the list, and then we can talk about some of these guys, what this combine may mean. Can they raise their stock? How much? How big of a shift can they make as far as their draft stock goes when it comes to the NFL combine and the numbers that they may be able to put up? So first and foremost, offense is up. Cade Klubnik is one of the 15 quarterbacks that were invited to the NFL combine this year. Adam Randall, first-year running back, gets an invite to the NFL combine. Blake Miller, a starter on Clemson's offensive line from day one. Antonio Williams, just an absolute dog out there at the wide receiver position. Then switching over to the defensive side of the ball, Jordan, we got DeMonte Capehart, Peter Woods, TJ Parker, Avion Terrell, and Wade Woodaz to round out the 9 Tigers that will be participating in this year's NFL Combine. So your thoughts on that list of guys and who can kind of affect their draft stock the most, you think, when it comes to putting up the numbers at the NFL Combine?
Yeah, I think that this is a really good opportunity for a few of these guys to really kind of, make some noise here. In terms of the first round caliber players, I think those guys probably aren't going to change too many minds at the combine, and in terms of significantly increasing their stock. I mean, the guys that you've heard about during this draft cycle, the Peter Woods, the TJ Parkers, I think those guys are pretty well established at this point as potential first round guys. I think with TJ Parker, it's going to be interesting because he's done a lot of work. Obviously, the Senior Bowl was a really, really good showing for him, and I think he brought himself into the first round on a lot of teams' boards. But there might be still some teams straggling that are on the fence with a good, and might want to see a good testing day for him to feel really solid about him being a bona fide first round pick. So maybe if he tests well, that'll help him a decent bit. Peter Woods, I think he could potentially raise his stock a little bit. It seems like either teams feel like he's a potential top 10 pick, and then other teams are like, we'll take him in like the mid to late first round. So there's a little bit of a split on him. I tend to think he's the caliber of talent that you take closer to the top 10. I don't think there's many guys with his with the power that he has in his hands and his disruptiveness. I think it's pretty rare, and there's not many guys in this draft class that have it quite like he does. But that being said, I think he's still pretty comfortably there. Avion Terrell is going to be interesting because I think he's another guy that teams are really, really split on in terms of his kind of where he kind of sits, because I think the biggest question with him has always been the size component. I mean, he's very much a capable and he plays bigger than his measurables, but he's not his brother in terms of like prototypical corner size. Some teams will probably view him as a nickel in the league. Other teams might feel like he can play on the outside. We'll see. So I think him testing well in that aspect would be good. And then going kind of switching sides to the offense. I think Antonio Williams could boost his stock a little bit with especially with a good 40 time. He's definitely been typecast in the NFL. It seems like, at least in the draft circles, as a true slot guy. So those guys don't typically get drafted super duper high in terms of like first round type tape. But I think that he has an opportunity to really increase his draft stock, because it feels like he's kind of slipped on some boards, fallen out of favor a little bit. I think just because of the injuries and the stuff that he's dealt with this past year. So I think he's got a really big opportunity. Let's see, Blake Miller. He's going to be interesting because he's another guy that teams are pretty split on. Some teams view him as a first-round caliber offensive tackle. I would probably draft him closer, probably in the second. But I think if he tests well, he might. All it takes is one person or one team to really like what he has, and I could see himself, maybe boosting himself into the late first round conversation. So I think those are some guys. And Demonte Capehart, I think, is another guy that could really increase his draft stock with good testing numbers, because he's a guy that just, I feel like the scouts are. I think they're underrating him a little bit. I don't know if I don't think you draft him in the first round, but I think he could be a day two guy if he tests well.
Absolutely. Having 9 guys at the combine is obviously good for Clemson. I think that's a good thing for the program. I'm excited to see kind of where a guy like Antonio Williams lands. Because I think he's such a versatile weapon on the offensive side of the ball, and maybe a little bit slept on as we go to enter the combine and the draft and stuff like that. So that's going to be really interesting. Adam Randall really intrigues me. What are NFL scouts going to really think of him? Obviously transitioning from wide receiver to running back was a huge risk for him last season. He did it. I think he did extremely well. He proved that he can be durable at the position. Obviously still got some stuff to learn. He's still very green, very new at the running back position. But I'll be interested to see if an NFL team will take a chance on him and see if he can get any traction in the NFL. So those are some guys that I'm definitely looking at to see kind of where they land. You hope that Clemson can get at least one guy in that first round. But that remains to be seen. Not a whole lot of movement up at the top typically when it comes to the NFL draft out of the combine, or that affecting it towards the top. But it does have a huge effect on some guys that may be drafted later or may go undrafted and make a difference in them being drafted and not drafted. So we'll keep an eye on all 9 of those guys. Wish them the best. Hope they put up all of their best numbers that they possibly can, their best measurables, and get a good chance to make a career out of it in the NFL. So we'll keep a close eye on all those guys, and a place to go so that you can keep an eye on all those NFL Combine guys and stories about the NFL Combine and college guys that are transitioning to the NFL. Is go ahead and stop by our Voice of College Football website. That's right. We have a VOCFB.com. That's VOCFB.com. All of our latest stories, our show schedules, everything's posted over there. Not just Clemson content, but all content, nationwide college football coverage over there on VOCFB.com. Go check it out. VOCFB.com. All right, Jordan, as we transition and the weeks start piling up and they go by, we are getting closer and closer to spring practice kicking off for the Clemson Tigers. And one of the things that you always think about heading into spring are what are some questions that we need answered this coming spring. And this is kind of a unique time for this Clemson Tiger team, and there is a ton of questions for Clemson. There's a lot of new pieces that came into the fold via the transfer portal. It's basically an entirely retooled defense via the transfer portal with some infusion of recruiting as well there. And then on the offensive side of the ball, largely unchanged as far as your playmakers on the outside. Dabo took a bit of a gamble in a lot of people's opinions by sticking or standing pat with what we had at quarterback and not going to the transfer portal. You only add one guy via the transfer portal, and that's the running back from SMU. So thoughts on Clemson heading into spring, what are some of your bigger questions that you would like to see at least start to be answered in spring practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest question for this team is, what does a Chad Morris offense in 2026 look like? I mean, and unfortunately, that's a question that probably won't get answered in spring, and that's one of the things that you're just going to have to. We'll know when we see it when they take the field. But I think that ultimately I think that's the biggest question, because so much of what this offensive struggles have been the last few seasons was just the inconsistency, the identity wasn't always there. The ability to run the football especially it's been a bane in recent years. And so I mean, Chad Morris is a guy that's going to want to run the football.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as manufacturing that and building off that to create explosive play opportunities and really put his quarterbacks in positions to succeed, I think it's going to be we're not really sure what that looks like. And so I think that's the question on top of who starts at quarterback, because I think the rest of the offense, I mean, you have some pieces that you feel like you can work with. I don't think the cupboard is bare by any means. And with another year of experience from the wide receiver room and maybe some help at the running back position, and some more guys, more capable depth at offensive line. Maybe there's a path where it's successful, but again, you don't really know until you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge question there. And then, on the defensive side of the ball for me, how quickly do these transfers, particularly on the back end, adapt, learn the playbook, learn what Tom Allen wants them to do on that side of the ball? I think that's going to be a big question mark for me this spring. How much insight will you get to that? Who really knows? The quarterback position obviously is a big one. I've mentioned the offensive line on here before. Who's going to kind of step up and kind of take the reins? You think you have your left tackle figured out and Braden Jacobs, right? Who's your right tackle going to be, right? Who's your center going to be ultimately? Is Harris Sewell going to step into that position and take that? Is it going to be one of the younger guys coming in, or one of them freshmen going to come in and surprise you and really push for playing time early? I think that'll be interesting to see what Matt Luke is saying about the offensive line early in spring. I'm going to be paying attention to in a big way. So I think offensive line for me and the back end of that defense is going to be huge. One of the biggest thing I think Clemson fans will be talking about is the quarterback competition. And Jordan, I'll ask you, do you think it's going to be a true quarterback competition in the sense of everybody's on even playing field and the best man wins the job, or where there'll be some level of loyalty shown to Chris Vizina for sticking around?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to give guys opportunities. I think that's ultimately what I think. If you're smart about this, I mean, you have to feel like these guys are going to get some, plenty of reps. But ultimately, it's about who do you trust, who do you feel the most comfortable with in the system. And there has been some buzz lately with obviously Chris Vizina is the presumed favorite, the presumed leader in the clubhouse, and that's how they've framed it so far early on. But pre-spring, he's the leader in the clubhouse, but he's earned the right to be the leader in the clubhouse. But he hasn't necessarily won the job in there yet. So, but that can only mean so much. Sometimes you're like, okay, well, that may be what they say publicly, but then behind closed doors are like they have no intentions of starting anybody else week one. So, we'll see. But I do think they're going to give guys like Chris Denson and Tate Reynolds opportunity, and I think we've heard some positive things in recent weeks about both Reynolds and Denson, and kind of what they've looked like early on in the pre-spring practice, workouts, and I think that's exciting. I mean, it's better than not hearing anything at all. So, I think that while I'm not totally convinced it's going to be a true competition, I think they're going to make sure to get those guys, opportunities and reps to really kind of, just boost their stock, at least even within the program. And because regardless, if Chris Vizina is the starter, you need to feel comfortable that whoever has the backup position can come in and play at a starting caliber level.
Absolutely.
And you feel okay. So, and those guys, they got to get up to speed quickly because, again, those are two young guys, and Tate Reynolds is a true freshman. So,
absolutely, man. If I'm being honest, do I think it's going to be a true quarterback battle in the sense of everybody's on an equal playing field? No, I don't. I do think one of those guys would have to be the clear-cut, just better than Chris Vizina in order to unseat him as the starter. That's just my opinion. I do think Dabo's going to show some loyalty there to Chris Vizina for sticking around. And somebody would have to be the clear option that would give Clemson a better chance to win games before they would become the starter, at least going into the season, over Chris Vizina. Now, if things happen and he's not playing well, I could certainly see them shifting gears and going a different direction during the season. But I think going into the season, I would be surprised if Chris Vizina is not the guy walking out there on your first drive of the season in Death Valley against LSU, the fake Death Valley, but Death Valley nonetheless. But that's just kind of where I'm at. So lots of questions for this Clemson Tiger team heading into spring practice. Will they all be answered? No, but hopefully we get a bit more information about this team and where they truly are because, man, last year was supposed to be the year, and it couldn't have gone off the rails any more abruptly than it did. So we will see what this season has in store for us Tiger fans. But again, a lot of questions, and they will not all be answered in spring. But hopefully, we feel at least a little better after spring. But I'm not sure. I'm not so certain that will be the case.
Yeah.
The Voice of College Football has our very own merch website. Hope you guys will go over and check it out. I'm going to put it on the screen here so you guys can see it. It's VOCFB-shop. That's VOCFB-shop. I'm showing you our Clemson merch here. We have a bunch of other team channels merch on here as well. Sweaters, T-shirts, polos, tumblers, coffee cups, hats. Anything you could possibly want. It supports the channel. It supports the Voice of College Football, and you get something nice for yourself. So go check it out. You got all the other team channels over here, Florida State, Colorado, Auburn, Alabama, all our team channels over there. So be sure to go check it out, VOCFB-shop, VOCFB-shop. And we would appreciate you going to support the channel in that way. Jordan, it is that time of the week again. Time for our player highlight. This week, we are highlighting none other than running back Gideon Davidson. Had a bit of a quiet year last year, obviously, running behind Adam Randall. Adam Randall got the bulk of the carries last year. Did a pretty good job transitioning from wide receiver to running back. We talked about him heading into the combine and wish him the best. But from all sources, Gideon Davidson is going to be probably the guy heading into the 2026 season for the Clemson Tigers at the running back position. Obviously, he'll probably split some snaps with the transfer out of SMU, but his stats last season, 13 games played, he had 60 attempts, 260 yards, averaged 4.3 yards per carry. His longest run last year was 28 yards. So, Jordan, your thoughts on Gideon Davidson? What kind of season do you think he has in the upcoming 2026 season? Do you see him as the clear-cut RB1? Do you think there will be kind of a 50-50 split there? How do you think that running back position will shake out? And what is Gideon Davidson going to bring to this Clemson Tigers backfield?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of hype coming into last season, a lot of excitement. I heard a lot of good things, in the offseason before the 2025 offseason. But, obviously it didn't really play out that way, the way that maybe a lot of us thought, including myself. And, I don't think that's necessarily a cause for concern, at least not yet. But certainly you wanted to see more. When he did get carries last season, it was, he had some flashes, but it didn't look like he was all the way there, all the way comfortable. He wasn't as far along as maybe we had thought he would have been.
Right.
So, I think the goal this offseason has been really kind of, trying to get him to make that sophomore year jump. I think you're going to need him to, because this is not a running back room full of, every down backs or guys that you feel like are true RB1 types. Obviously, bringing in Chris Johnson from SMU is going to help tremendously. But he's also going to be involved in the offense in other ways, not just traditionally running the football. So you need to have a guy that your go-to back. And I think it's time, Gid has to, take that next step in his development, because I don't think there's really, I don't really think there's anybody else that's truly fit to take on that role right now. We'll see. David Ezumume had some flashes towards the end of last year. So him taking another step in his development will help. But still, I think the staff thinks the highest of Gideon Davidson, and I think they're going to rely on him the most in the running game. So I think he's got to develop into the that next step in his development and get closer to the complete version of what they think he can be. Especially with the you're unsure kind of about the rest of that room. I mean, Jay Haynes is a guy that he injured in 2024 and he really didn't work his way back in. Rehab has not been as kind to him as maybe they thought. And that is a bad fall for Carter Welling there. But anyway, rehab has not been as kind to Jay Haynes as maybe we had hoped, and so it took him longer to work his way back. And so you can't rely on him to be, at least as it stands right now, you can't expect him to be back, 100% and be ready to step and fill those shoes either. So, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Gid. I think he has the tools. I still believe that in the player that we saw coming out of high school. I think that's going to be, but him becoming that version of himself is going to be huge for this offense, especially if, this is going to be a run-first football team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chad Morris has said it on numerous occasions when he's either done interviews or his introductory press conference, talked about this being a kind of a two-back run-first offense that's going to do some play action, take shots deep. So I think Gideon Davidson is going to be a critical part. And, he did have a lot of the hype, as you mentioned, heading into last season, but he was just a freshman, and albeit a very talented and I think a well-prepared freshman heading in to college football, you just never know until guys get in the game and really start seeing that game type speed. And it seemed that, he was definitely a guy that can contribute last year. But you're looking for Gideon Davidson to kind of take that next step this offseason and really become that like go-to back. You mentioned Chris Johnson, and he's going to be a big part of the offense, I think, but he's going to be used in more of a lot of different type of ways, not just straight handoffs. He'll be used lining up out wide and catching passes out of the backfield. And Gideon Davidson can do some of that as well. But I think he's probably going to be looked at as trying to be that every down type of back, with Chris Johnson kind of being that change of pace type of guy. So that's how I see it playing out. I think Gideon Davidson is going to take another step. Obviously, he's physically talented. We saw that he had flashes at times last season, and he just needs to build on it, on reading his blocks and making the right cuts and hitting the holes at the right times and all of that type of stuff. And part of the challenge for him is obviously going to be learning a completely new system, completely new offense, new running schemes, new blocking schemes. So that'll kind of be a across the board type of thing for the offense, but certainly something that you're going to pay attention to with a young guy like Gideon Davidson. So I look for him to take a significant jump next season and really step into that RB1 role with Chris Johnson taking that change of pace type of deal when it comes to this new and hopefully improved Chad Morris offense that's going to be debuting for Clemson in 2026.
Yep, 100%.
All right, guys, make sure you search Clemson Live on all your favorite audio streaming platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. Search Clemson Live. Give us a rate, review, subscribe over there. Whether you're on a long run, on a long drive, whenever you like to listen to your podcast, make sure you're giving us a follow, give us a download, give us a listen over there. All of our long-form content's over there. These shows, our cut-up videos are over there. So go check it out in podcast form, and we would really appreciate you guys for supporting us in that way. Couple more topics before we get out of here tonight, Jordan. Clemson's baseball team coming through with the perfect start to the season. Obviously, Clemson baseball opened up against Army, played really well. Pitching looked really, really good. And then yesterday against Charlotte, had a big 11-1 win, run rule that ended in 7 innings. Not a whole lot of resistance there from Charlotte. So your thoughts early on the baseball team? They've had a perfect start. The pitching has looked good early. The bats have looked pretty good. Your kind of thoughts on this baseball team, how they've looked through 4 games. Small sample size, but they looked pretty good so far. I think pitching is kind of looking probably right now as good as we could have hoped this early in the season.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really nice start for Eric Bakich and the crew. I mean, I think they've seen a lot from the new faces that I think they really like. And, you're seeing some of the other guys that have been in the program start to take that next step. Obviously, the big star for this team early on has been Nate Savoy. He's been tearing the cover off the baseball right now with his power. Really, really impressed with him. But this lineup in general is just hitting really well. Tristan McClatty looks like he's taken that next step in his development and is poised to be one of your top guys. Jacob Gerald still has all the power that he showed last season, and I think he's going to be a big time home run guy for you. I think this is a really, really solid lineup that they put together offensively. And then, but I think the star and really the conversation needs to be had about this pitching staff. I think this is the best it's looked since Brad. Oh my God! You see, I'm in basketball mode. I'm watching this team since Eric Bakich has taken over the job, and not only does this staff throw strikes, but they have guys with velo, and I think that's one of the things that's been the biggest thing with this program, in especially when it comes to winning in the postseason, is not having the high the high leverage arms that you need, and especially guys that can that throw with some power, especially when you play some of the more talented bats in the country. And I think, it's going to be huge to have guys that, not only are throwing for strikes, but they are and have good movement, but they also just they can blow one past you. And they have a lot of guys that can do that now. A lot of guys sitting at 94, 95 plus in this, in this pitching staff, and they were just kind of rolling them out. I think the guy I'm most excited about right now is Justin Legurnick. I think he's a guy that we always knew had really, really good stuff, but last season the control was questionable when he got into some opportunities for some high leverage starts, and he kind of fell out of favor as the season went on. But this year it looks like he looks like a whole different guy. I mean, the stuff is still there. It's always been there, but now the control, the location is just so much better than it was last year, and I think that's really exciting. I mean, Aiden Canuck, in his one start, didn't even pitch his best, but and he was playing not 100%. I believe he was sick, but he still looked pretty solid. I mean, I think this is the deepest and the most versatile staff that they've put together so far. And I think, this is going to be a group that's going to, I think they're going to be one of the better ones in the ACC as it stands right now. I know it's early, it's small sample size, but, just sometimes it when you see it, and it, just the look of this group is different than it was last year. So, I like this team, and I think with guys hitting more home runs, which is something they didn't do a ton of last year, I think it's going to make them a tough team to beat, and I think they're already starting to impress on the national scene. And obviously a good midweek win over Charlotte yesterday, a team that is going to be in contention for the NCAA tournament, and you run rule them, your second run rule of the season. So really excited about this group.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You nailed it there. And really the difference this season is the pitching staff so far. You mentioned how deep it is, the velocity that a lot of these guys are throwing, not just one guy, but several guys throwing with very high velo. Certainly the deepest pitching group our bullpen that we've had, I think, since Eric Bakich has taken over as the Clemson baseball coach. And you mentioned the return of the pop in the bat a bit, only allowing 3 runs through 4 games so far. The pitching has been the difference, and I think that's what gives me the most encouragement going forward for this baseball team. Obviously, very small sample size. It's only 4 games. There's don't go talking about Omaha and all this stuff yet, but it is very encouraging to see just how dominant that pitching staff has been early in this season so far. Fingers crossed for health. That's been one of Clemson's issues in the past few seasons, is staying healthy, particularly at the pitching position. So hopefully we can do that. Because it looks like a staff that can take this Clemson team a long way when it comes to the ACC and into the postseason. So, good start. Let's keep it rolling. Make sure you guys are using the Amazon link each and every time you go check out at Amazon. Most of us do a big majority of our shopping online these days, and Amazon is one of the big places that we do that shopping. So in the description of this video, there's an Amazon link. Just copy it. When you're checking out your regular Amazon order, you don't have to do anything crazy. Just paste that Amazon code into the checkout screen while you're checking out. It gives a little kickback to the Voice of College Football. It helps support the show, and you get your products as you normally would. So we would appreciate some help with that. Use the Amazon link and help out Clemson at the Voice of College Football. We would appreciate it. All right, Jordan. This softball team, we got to talk about them.
Yeah.
As good as it started out,
hoping you wouldn't say that.
yeah, we went down to Clearwater, and the first 2 days of the season were great. I mean, you had a top 5 win against Oregon. You had a top 23 win against Liberty. That was a back-to-back games on day 2 of the Clearwater tournament. And then heading on day 3 of that tournament, Clemson stumbled. You lose to Auburn, you lose to Michigan State, but then you come back home. You have your home opener, and you win against Furman pretty easily. You run rule Furman, so you're like, okay, they shook back. We're going to be okay. And then they go out to San Marcos, Texas last weekend, and it was not a kind tournament to Clemson, particularly those first 2 games. They lost 16-0 in those first 2 games. They were shut out in back-to-back games against Texas State and Arkansas. Arkansas run-ruled them, so it only went 5 innings. They got 12 runs scored on them. First time Clemson's been shut out in a very, very long time. So it's been a bit of a rocky go since then. They come back, they bounce back, they win against BYU, they win against Wichita State, and then the second meeting against Arkansas was canceled due to weather. They come out tonight, play Charlotte, lose 8-3 against Charlotte, the first ever loss against Charlotte in program history. Jordan, what's going on with this softball team? What's their issues? Why do they seem to just kind of be stumbling? They came out of the gate hot, and now they're stumbling, and now they're 6-5, so they're just above 500. Again, early in the season, a lot of softball to be played, but they are stumbling quite a bit early on in the season here.
Yeah, it's pretty perplexing with this group. I mean, this team is, coming into the season, you felt like, you had done a lot of development, and, obviously with how this team finished the year last year and with how many people you had returning, you thought this was going to be a team that was, going to be in contention to win the ACC again. And obviously that's, you're not out of it. I mean, you think about where this team was last season, they started out pretty poorly as well. But, it doesn't look like they are particularly comfortable in their roles right now. And I don't think that, I think really, the pitching has been really, really disappointing. They just have not had a whole lot of high leverage arms so far. And offensively, it's just been really, really hit or miss, pun intended. And I think that's, that's just a really bad combination to winning softball games. This is just not a team that has a whole lot of players that are playing at a consistently high level right now. And that's the frustrating thing with a group that has the experience and what you did in the transfer portal as well. You thought, this team would be in better position than they are right now, especially with how they started the year. So I don't know. Obviously John Rittman gets paid a decent amount of money to figure it out. And, I said, we've seen this team turn it around before, like literally last season. But, it reminds me a little bit of that last Valerie Cagle year where, you had all those players returning and, they just weren't the same. But even in that team started out better than this one did. So, they got to start figuring some things out quick and in a hurry because, playing like this, you're not going to win many games in conference play. That's for sure. With how tough the ACC is.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It's not going to be an easy slate when you get into conference play and playing some of those big time ACC programs. You think of Duke, Florida State, Virginia. Like you're not winning those games unless you figure something out quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I think one of the most concerning things when you look at this softball team is the pitching. It was even evident in that Clearwater. opening tournament, they played well, but I noticed he kept going back to the same pitchers over and over again.
Yep.
And typically that's not a good thing. And it kind of surprised me because, listening to his interviews heading into the season, he talked about, how well they did in the transfer portal when it came to pitching and how deep he thought his staff was heading into the season. He thought he had probably, if not his deepest, one of his deepest staffs heading into the season. And it just does not look like it is working out that way on the field. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. If they hope to have any semblance of being at or near the top of the ACC, you're going to have, that pitching is going to have to get a whole lot better quickly. The hitting, I think, will come around. They're hitting great in spots, and then other times they're going cold. I think probably that's got something to do with, just being early on in the season and some inconsistency there. I think they probably will get that figured out when it comes to the offense. But where it's going to eat you up in ACC play is if you don't have a deep enough pitching staff. And if you're relying on one or two arms, the ACC is going to tear you up. It's not going to go well for you. So that's kind of the biggest concern for me for the softball team. Can they get it figured out? We'll have to wait and see. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be more than – it's got to be – like you said, it's got to be more than 1 to 2 arms. That's just not sustainable at all.
It's not.
There are too many good bats in the ACC right now.
Yeah, they're just gonna figure you out. I mean, you talking about, you got a weekend of 3 games, a weekend series with a team. You can't throw the same 2 pitchers at them.
No.
These batters are good. They're gonna, regardless of how good those 1 or 2 pitchers are, these batters are gonna figure them out. That's just something that John Rittman's got to get figured out. So we'll see if he can get that done. But wish softball all the best. Hopefully they can get it turned around here before it gets off the rails.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, guys, that does it for our planned portion of the show. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hit that like button while you're in here. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We're going to get to a couple comments, and then we'll get out of here for the night, Jordan. All right, let's see here. I don't know if you can see the comments, so.
Okay. All right. I hit a really crazy lag spike or whatever. I don't know.
I got you.
All right, we're good. Yeah, I can see the comments.
Okay.
Let's see what you guys are talking about. John hits us with a BYOG or sell. Can I select it?
I got you.
I can't. There we go. BYOG or sell men's basketball drop another on Saturday. Knowles are on a streak lately. Yeah, they do play Florida State this weekend. I don't know. I'm gonna sell. I'm. This skid has been really frustrating. I mean, especially with the lack of. I think really what's hurt this team so far in this little 3-game stretch has been the guard play. It just is. It's taken a massive fall. And when you have, one of your main guys like Carter Welling not playing at 100%, and obviously the defensive efforts have been, especially 2 of the last 3 have been pretty rough. You need to get better play out of your guards. Dylan Hunter, I mean, what was he? He had like 2 points in like the last 3 games or something like that. before tonight, like that's not going to cut it, man. I mean, Justin Porter, he's got to start hitting some shots and being more of a, being more of a presence there. And because he hasn't been as great on the defensive end as he was earlier in the season. So I mean, you gotta make up for it somewhere. And they're just not playing well. These guards are not playing well. I think Ace Buckner has probably been your best guard, and that's. I mean, I think obviously I think the world of Ace Buckner, and I think he's going to be a really outstanding player for you. But you need your leaders to be leaders, your senior guys to be senior guys, and they just don't have it right now. And so I think really, if this team is going to kind of turn it around and kind of bounce back, they're going to have to get good play from their guards. I mean, Florida State has good guard play. They have guys that can score. And it's going to be important. You can't make this be this can't turn into a collapse. That's you're not there yet. You're not in collapse territory yet, but you're heading there. If you let this, if you let this stretch, continue to beat you over and over again, because again, you've got some tough game. You still got some tough games left on the slate. You got to play Louisville. You got to play North Carolina on the road. This team right now is not going to be either one of those teams playing the way they are. And you very well could lose this weekend against Florida State playing the way you are right now. So, I think the sense of urgency needs to be there because you're already taking a hit in terms of your seed line and all of that. But I really think, this is. I don't think this is emblematic yet of a collapse, but they do need to. They do need to right the ship in a hurry. And again, I think it starts with the guard play. Because I think defensively, I think they're going to figure it out. I mean, Brad Brownell teams tend to figure it out. And, Wake Forest was shooting unconscious tonight. So that didn't help. But, you still got to be better. You just too many just the 3-point defense has just not been good 2 of the last 3 games. And it's against 2 teams that are, Virginia Tech and Wake Forest in particular, that just are, they're not particularly great offensive teams. You got to be better than that. Duke was what it was, and that ironically was your best defensive effort. But you got to get. I think the defense will settle in. You got to get better play from your guards because you got to. I mean, this team has to score. I mean, and you need everybody playing well. This is not a team with, a whole lot of star power. And Brad Brownell talked about it. When guys aren't playing well, it's magnified because this is not a super uber talented team. So I think that this is a opportunity to really kind of turn things around and kind of right the ship. But you got to do it. Like I said, you got to do it in a hurry. Did we get all that or
Yeah. We heard everything.
Okay, good. I was it just went quiet. Okay. Okay, now my StreamYard's struggling. You pick one now.
All right, I got you. Let's see. John says, which freshman will have the biggest impact on the OL this year? I'm going with Scruggs. Out of necessity, he'll end up taking more snaps through the season and may end up having to start at some time.
I don't know. I don't know if Scruggs will be my pick. I think that's very possible. For me, I think it's Chance Barkley. I think he's the most ready to. I feel like he's the most ready to play right now. I think he's impressed the most in terms of pre-spring and also obviously like his senior year and in camp settings he really was a star. And so I think he's a guy that's going to, potentially work his way into the rotation, and maybe, get some more trust from Matt Luke. I think he's a guy that, is just one of those guys that's just beyond his years. And, at offensive line, especially, that's really tough, making that, especially when you're making that transition from high school to college. So having a guy that's ready to play as a true freshman, I think those guys are pretty rare. And, I think he's the most ready to play of this group right now. And then also, I could also see a guy like Grant Wise, finding his way into the rotation if, like, you don't have the center position locked up, and, maybe you're not getting enough from from the veteran guys like Harris Sewell and others. But I think Carter Scruggs is a guy that, especially if you really are struggling to find options at tackle. I mean, I think he's a guy. I don't think that would be ideal if he's, starting for you, but, I think that is his potential, down the line. I don't know if you want him starting so soon.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Chance Barkley's got the best chance of making that early impact on this offensive line.
Yep.
All right. Tiger Tom gets in here, says, do you guys know where our pitching staff is rated within the ACC?
I mean, I don't have metrics for you. I mean, I think any ones that are probably still a little, they're still taking in data, and they're probably not all that, fleshed out yet. But, just based on what my eyes tell me and the limited action I've seen from other teams within the league, I mean, I think Clemson is probably well within the top 5 right now, at least top 5 performing. And you could argue, they've been the best performing pitching staff, early in the season. But, obviously, it takes more than, just however many games they've played, like 5,
Yeah.
to really get a true sense of, where everybody is in the league. But I think so far, I would rate them, very highly within the league. And, personally, I expect that to hold true. I think they'll be one of the better pitching staffs in the ACC with the amount of arms they feel confident in right now, and they're getting action right now. It's the very opposite of what we talked about with the softball team. Like, you're seeing, Eric Bakich and Jimmy Bellinger go to multiple arms, and a lot of guys that give them a lot of versatility. Guys with velo, guys with good with strong stuff. And it's a good mix of youthful young guys and guys that have been in the program. I mean, I didn't even mention a guy like Joe Allen, who has been steady Eddie the last couple of years, and has played some really high leverage innings and pitched some high leverage innings and been really awesome. So, I mean, that's just another great guy to have in the lineup. And, it's, you're going to miss a guy like Lucas Malstedt, but, it's always nice to have guys that, Lucas was he's a submarine pitcher, and he kind of got you with movement and kind of the deception and the difficulty to kind of, read the pitch out of the hands. But now you have a lot of guys that are just pumping 95, 96, 97 plus. That's invaluable. And I think it's going to serve this team well down the stretch.
Yeah, huge difference in the depth and just how dynamic that bullpen is this season. Titties gets in here, says, has Clemson benefited from an easier ACC schedule?
I'm assuming he's talking basketball, and I would say yes. I think, obviously you can only play who's in front of you. And right. I want to credit, I don't want to take away credit from Brad Brownell and this team, because they in large parts have outplayed their talent level up to this point. This is not one of the highest paid rosters in the league. This is not one of the most star-studded NBA draft caliber rosters in the league. But they've played really well for much of this season. But like I said, it doesn't take much with a team whose margins are that slim to for a skid like this to happen.
Yeah.
And when your senior guys aren't playing well, I mean you're asking to drop games you shouldn't, and you're going to drop games to the Virginia Techs and the Wake Forest because you're not all that more talented than them. So I think, I think they've benefited from an easier ACC schedule up to this point. But I also think, not many teams would have done what they did with the schedule they had. I'm like, I don't think this is just like a product of the schedule. I think they just have guys that aren't playing well. And again, I think this ceiling for this team was really capped when Zach Foster went out for the season. I'm not one to blame injuries and all that, but he was one of your few like truly high caliber talents on the roster. He was still kind of settling into things, but I think he was developing into a difference maker, and I think he's going to be a difference maker for you. As his career progresses. It's been really nice to see Ace Buckner develop, but again, he's still a guy that's developing, and he's only going to get better. But you can't expect him to be that guy right now. I mean, you got to get more from your seniors, and they're just not getting it right now. And like I said, you got to get off the mat. And I'm not all that worried. I mean, this has happened before. I mean, I think about the Elite Eight team a couple of years ago and where they were. They started out, I believe, 4-5 in ACC play. And they were, it was ugly. And obviously they started playing well towards the back half of their ACC slate. But then they get eliminated, and then they're one and done in the ACC tournament, and we're talking about, man, is this team even going to be able to beat New Mexico in the first round?
Right.
And then they go on the run that they did. So one thing I've noticed is that when it seems like, especially in recent years, when Brad Brownell teams have gone on a skid, that's when they started to play their best basketball. So I'm not overly concerned. I'm not going to say I'm not concerned. But I'm not overly concerned because we've seen what this team can be throughout the season, and they've played much better than this against better competition. So they benefited from an easier ACC slate to this point, but they've also played against the better teams they've played this season have looked much better than they did tonight in the last couple of games. So we'll see. You've turned these games, these last 4 remaining games, into almost must wins. Not in terms of tournament hopes, but must wins in terms of confidence, momentum, all of that. All of that stuff is real in college basketball. So, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be interesting to see if they can pull the nose of the plane up, if you will, because they're heading down a slippery slope right now. So they gotta course correct quick, fast, and in a hurry here. Does this offensive line have a higher upside than last year's? That's
yes, I mean, I guess long-term upside. I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if this season you're necessarily going to be much better. I think one of the things that I'm interested in is just how the change in scheme reflects itself with this group, because again, you were a primary. You based a lot out of counter with Garrett Riley, and that requires just a different different offensive line techniques, and you're asking your guys to do different things than what Chad Morris is going to want to do. Obviously they're going to be certainly more zone blocking, inside zone, outside zone. They still will run some counter, but they're not going to base they're not going to base everything out of it, and it's definitely going to be more traditional Clemson offense, so to speak. Does that help with some of the younger guys, and do some of the guys take to that system a little bit more than the Garrett Riley system the last 3 seasons? I don't know, but that's what makes it so hard to project with a new system, and a new system that you haven't seen implemented in college football in 7 years, 6-7 years. So I mean, I don't know. It's going to be tough to kind of gauge it in the spring, but I think that there is the opportunity for that, for guys to take to this scheme better than they did Garrett Riley's.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. Yeah, I don't know that this is going to be like a night and day type deal with the offensive line in 2026. But when we're talking about long term projecting out, I think we got the right coach at offensive line. I think you can see that by the type of guy that Clemson is starting to land. Um, but it's still going to take um, a little bit before we are where we truly want to be. I think it's got the potential to be better this next season. It's certainly going to have to be more consistent. If it, especially with this new Chad Moore scheme, and from what he said so far, he really does want to be a run first offense. So there's going to have to be some improvements in that offensive line if that's the style of offense that you're truly going into 2026 looking to run. So we'll see. Got my eye on them in the spring. It's one of the position groups that I think we need to pay attention to the most. Because I think, if that offense is going to be successful, it's going to start there. All right, Jordan, I think that does it for our listener questions tonight. I want to thank everybody for being in here tonight. I want to thank our channel members, John Sarian. Thank you for being in here. Thank you for supporting the show in that way. David, thank you for being in here and supporting the show on a monthly basis. I think I saw Arthur in here earlier as well. Thank you for being in here and supporting the show on a monthly basis. Really do appreciate you guys for helping us out in that way. Thank you guys all for being in here tonight. Hit that like button on your way out. If you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're doing. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Me and Jordan do this show, the All In Show, year-round, right here on Clemson at the Voice of College Football. Next week, we will be back to our Tuesday, 8 p.m., regularly scheduled All-In Show. We're going to manifest it. It's going to happen. Can't wait to see you guys there. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And that's all I got. Jordan, you got anything for the people before we hop off of here?
No, I mean, thank you guys, once again, for tuning in and bearing with us the last couple of weeks. It's been I saw John earlier in the chat that said we got to up our vitamins. I was like, yeah, you're probably right. I've been slacking on the vitamin C. I used to, I had been taking it daily, but kind of got slack with other things that didn't, ran out like last month, and I didn't buy a new bottle. So then I think that was a wake up call for sure. But seriously though, thank you guys for bearing with us. But we're going to be back to our regularly scheduled program next week, and so y'all make sure to hit that notification bell and make sure that you guys are here and on time, because
Absolutely.
we most certainly will try to be.
Absolutely. We will get back to our regularly scheduled. Apologize for the past couple weeks, guys. I know it's kind of weird to, constantly shifting the show, but we'll get back to our regularly scheduled time and day this coming week. Can't wait to chop it up with you guys about Clemson football and all the other sports going on around Clemson. Thank you guys so much for being in here. Really do appreciate you. Have a great rest of the week, and go Tigers.
Later, y'all.